So for 102 plus years now, the League of Women Voters has been empowering voters and defending democracy. Very soon, we'll be publishing the 2022 edition of our ballot issues pamphlet. This will be the 84th edition. We've been doing this since 1936, providing Colorado voters with nonpartisan, unbiased information about each issue on the state ballot. Ballot issues represents our educational side. We also have an advocacy side. One example of that you may have heard of is Amendments Y and Z. The League of Women Voters of Colorado was instrumental in drafting and promoting those two constitutional amendments that severely restricted partisan gerrymandering in our state through the creation of independent commissions, independent redistricting commissions. So another thing we do is provide inspiration. And that's certainly where tonight's presentation falls. Since inception, the League of Women Voters has worked to inspire women and men to run for office. And while this presentation isn't necessarily about running for office, you'll find plenty of inspiration here through some stories of great women and how they overcame obstacles. So with that, I would like to introduce Jill Tietjen. Jill is an author, international speaker, and an electrical engineer. After more than 45 years in the electrical utility industry, her professional focus is now on women's advocacy worldwide. A former blogger for the Huffington Post, she speaks nationally on the accomplishments of women, nominates women for awards, and continues to write books, 12 published to date, following in the footsteps of her best-selling and award-winning books, Her Story, a timeline of the women who changed America, and Hollywood, Her Story, an illustrated history of women and the movies. Her latest award-winning book, Over, Under, Around, and Through, How Hall of Famers Surmount Obstacles, was released by Fulcrum Publishing in May of this year. She's a frequent keynote speaker, as her positive energy and her ability to relate to the audience result in inspired and energized listeners. She has been inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame and the Colorado Authors Hall of Fame. Thank you for being here, Jill. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Beth. It's really my pleasure to be here. And I'm hoping that we get to have a discussion tonight, not just me talking. But I would like to give some introductory comments about the book, Over, Under, Around, and Through, How Hall of Famers Surmount Obstacles, so that you know where it came from, which you may have actually already found if you've read the book or seen the book or looked at the book at all. Just give you a little perspective, and then hopefully we'll have an opportunity, as I said, to have a discussion. I do have presentations, but that was not what I thought tonight's format would be. So in May of 2020, right in the thick of the beginnings of the pandemic, I was on one of my first virtual happy hours. I don't know how many of you had been on a virtual happy hour before May of 2020, but I had not. And I was on a virtual happy hour with my wine sitting actually exactly right here where I am right now, for one of the organizations that I'm affiliated with, which is the International Women's Forum, the Colorado chapter. And a woman who was also on the virtual happy hour with me, whose name also is Jill, her name is Jill Wright, said, you know, why don't you, Jill Tietjen, write a book on how women in the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame overcame the obstacles in their lives? And I thought that was an intriguing concept. And Jill Wright and I had a conversation after that evening. And I said, well, what are you thinking about? And that's basically what she said, the same thing again. And so I probably emailed my friend and colleague, Ellie Greenberg, who lives really not very far, who lived, sorry, it's past tense, lived not very far from me. And I said, Ellie, what do you think of this concept? And she said, well, let's talk about it. And so I did pick up of lunch at Panera. I mean, we all remember this stuff of what was happening in the pandemic at the time. And I took our lunch over to Ellie's patio, where we sat socially distanced and started to think about what this book might look like. So that would have been probably June of 2020. By July, we actually conducted our first interviews. In total, we did 31 interviews. And, 50 is a nice number, a nice round number. So we took the 31 that we conducted and researched 19 women who were not living with us anymore. And well, I researched more than that, but I could find 19 that I could tell stories about, because what we decided in the end was that this was going to be stories, and they were going to be grouped by the primary skill that the woman used to overcome the obstacle in her life. And what we say is usually you use 1 or 2 or 5. I mean, you use them singly or in combination. And then we had to figure out what the skills were, and we did research for that as well. And the way this works is it always has to be a list of 10. Everything has to be 10. I don't know why, but that's what it has to be. So we have mental intelligence, emotional intelligence, social support, moral compass and spirituality together, because we can only have 10, determination, persistence, and perseverance together, because we can only have 10, creativity, optimism, resilience, action orientation, and passion. And as we wrote the stories, we slotted the woman in the skill that the story represented. And so, I mean, a lot of people think this is funny who know me, said, well, Jill, if you had 50, I would have expected you to put 5 stories in each of the 10 skills, because I'm an engineer. And I went, well, that's not how it worked. If they needed to go under resilience, they went under resilience. If they needed to be under emotional intelligence, they were in emotional intelligence. And however it fell out, it fell out. And then, so we finished writing the book in early December of 2020. We started contacting publishers in 2021. Ellie had published previously with Fulcrum Publishers, which is here in the Denver metro area. They were interested in publishing the book. We signed the book contract on April 28th. Ellie had just gotten out of a 2-month stay in the hospital. And she had been declining the whole time that we had been writing the book. And we got the book cover at the end of August of 2021. And the proofs probably at the beginning of September, and Ellie died on the 15th of September, 2021. In December of 2021, I started asking people to blurb the book. Those are the endorsements, that you see where people say things about it. And the response that I kept getting to this book was just unexpected, completely unexpected. People keep telling me how inspirational the book is, how it provides them with a handbook, how when they're trying to figure out how to solve an obstacle in their lives, they go to read a story. Each of the stories is 350 to 450 words. So, and each story is just, let's see if we can do that, a 2-page spread. And so and there are 50 of them. So you can read 1, you can read 10, you can read 2, you can read whatever makes sense. And you can do, you can brush your teeth and read 1. And so very, very interesting to me, uplifting, inspirational, those kinds of words. And it has won an award, a writing award, actually, women's literature, nonfiction, and was a finalist for another award under biography. And so it's been submitted for other awards. A curriculum has been written for middle school and early high school students, which is available on the Fulcrum website. And I've spoken a lot about it around the country already. And I've spoken to book clubs as well. And so I think with that, I want to stop and then answer your questions, have a discussion, and see how we want to proceed from there.
I want to hear some stories.
You want to hear stories?
Mhm.
Okay. Well,
But that's just me. Anybody else?
the only one I can see is Kathy Wilson. Everybody else is not on live video.
I want to hear some stories too, since I haven't, had a chance to read it.
Okay. All right.
And I'd like to, I guess I wanted to know, I'm sorry, I blacked out because I just came in from the golf course and it was 90 degrees out there. So
Well, we can't smell you here.
that's good. That's why. Oh, I don't think you want to see me either. But anyway, I was just interested in who all the people were
All right. Well,
that you selected or how you went about selecting them, or maybe you kind of indicated that, but.
no, I didn't indicate it. They are all inductees into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't know who they all are.
All right. I'm going to
Any
tell
of
you.
them.
I will tell you.
Okay.
So Ellie and I are both inductees. So we did our stories as well. We're both in the book. But let me just give you some of the names that I think you might not know them either, but some of them you will. So Dr. Florence Sabin, who was the first woman elected to the National Academy of Sciences in 1925. She was a doctor. Temple Grandin,
Mhm.
scientist and autism expert at Colorado State University. Mary Malarkey, who was the first female Chief Justice of the Colorado Supreme Court. Fannie Mae Duncan. And by the way, there are mini bios in the back of the book for each of the women. They're just like 3 or 4 sentences each, but they tell you what the women did. So Fannie Mae Duncan ran a social club in Colorado Springs and brought acts into her integrated social club, which was quite a skill for that time. Goody Gaskill developed the Colorado Trail. Dingling Sioux brought the Dragon Boat Festival to Colorado. Carlotta Walls Lanier is the youngest of the Little Rock Nine, the 9 African-American students.
Can I jump in for a quick sec?
Yeah.
Carlotta was also honored by the League of Women Voters of
That's right.
Colorado as a leader of democracy, probably 10 years ago.
Right. So, okay. So let me see if I can do this. I'm not sure I have this all correct, but Carlotta Walls Lanier was a leader of democracy. Dottie Lamb, who is in the book, was a leader of democracy. Polly Baca in the book is a leader of democracy. Has Josie Heath been a leader of democracy? Okay, so Josie Heath ran for
I'm sure.
ran for the Senate, the United States Senate. And so, I mean, there are 50 of them. There are judges, there are astronauts. Dr. Justina Ford, who was the first African-American doctor, female doctor in Colorado. Lena Archuleta, who was very active in the Denver Public Schools. Emily Howell Warner, the first female pilot of a commercial airline. Marilyn Vanderburg Atler, incest survivor. On and on and on. Carol Mutter, who's a general, the first female general in the United States Marine Corps. Doc Susie Anderson, Clara Brown, Babe Zaharias, the athlete of the 20th century. Frances Wise Bart Jacobs, the founder of United Way and National Jewish. Antonio Brico, the orchestra conductor. Marion Downs, who fought for 40 years to bring newborn infant hearing screening so that it's now actually universally accepted internationally. So there are 50 of these women in the book. Oh, Pat Schroeder. You probably know Pat Schroeder. she's in the book too. And Lorraine Arulian, who was a banking executive and became the first president of Colorado Women's Bank when it was established. And so I love all of these stories. And I don't know, I think I'll do Martha's, Martha Uriosti, who just found that Montessori education was the best thing ever. See if I can find her. I'll just have to look at the table of contents and then I will know. Oh, she's under optimism. And if we want, I actually have now sound bites with their words from their interviews. If we're interested in hearing some of them, we can do some of those. I think I will do Martha, and then I'll do Polly, and then we'll see what you all want to do after that, because I have a fabulous sound clip from Polly as well. And each of the stories has a title. And the title of Martha Uriosti's is Better to Light One Little Candle Than to Curse the Darkness. Martha Uriosti says that during her 45-year career in the Denver public schools, anytime there was a major problem to address, it seemed someone would ask her to fix it. Actually, she says, they would just assign her the problem to fix. But with her relentless optimism and her belief that it is better to light one little candle than to curse the darkness, Martha would rise to the occasion and handle the problem. The specific problem that enabled Martha to find her passion was being assigned to one of the high schools in Denver. The task was to address the school dropout problem. When Martha inadvertently discovered Montessori education, she fell in love with the idea that Montessori could really help children so they wouldn't drop out of school. Helping young children, 3, 4, and 5 years old, learn to love learning was possible through Montessori, she believed. Then they would be set for a lifelong love of learning and would not drop out of school. Martha asked to be sent as the principal to an elementary school with the intention of implementing a Montessori program. She was then assigned to the toughest school in Northeast Denver, in which only 18% of the children were meeting the district's educational standards. The children were poor and the community was blighted. In addition, the school was out of compliance with the desegregation order from the United States District Court. After 9 years of Martha's leadership and the implementation of Montessori education, 50% of the students were meeting educational standards. The school was second in the city in terms of academic scores, and the community and parents had coalesced around Martha's leadership. This was not the end of the problems that Martha addressed during her career in the Denver public schools, but she had found her true North Star, Montessori education. She has continued her Montessori education advocacy even after retirement. She has extended Montessori to very young children and to children in Uganda. All of this occurred because Martha believed it was better to light one little candle than to curse the darkness. You want to hear Polly's? Okay. Polly's is under passion, the skill of passion, and it's titled, No Mexicans or Dogs Allowed. Polly Baca traces her passion to change bigotry and racial prejudice back to when she was 3 years old. Her family attended the only Catholic school church in Greeley, Colorado. One Sunday morning, Polly saw little girls all dressed in white so they could march around the church. She wanted to sit in the center aisle so she could see them go around. She pestered her parents until the family moved and sat in the center aisle. Almost immediately, an usher came over and told them they would have to move. The church was segregated, and Mexican Americans had to sit in the side aisles only. They were not allowed in the center aisle. Polly knew this was wrong. It made her feel that she was less than. And that feeling was reinforced by signs in store windows in Greeley that said, "No Mexicans or dogs allowed." But from that pain of bigotry came her mission. She began to think there was a burden on her shoulders and that she was going to change the racial inequality she began to see all around her. It was her responsibility. Polly studied in elementary school. She studied in high school, the laboratory school at what now is the University of Northern Colorado. She qualified for a joint scholarship and used it to attend Colorado State University. She was always motivated by having to be better than in order to be just as good as. Her list of firsts became long and impressive. She was the first college student to win a statewide office in the Young Democrats. She was the first woman and the first Mexican American to edit a labor union newspaper. She was the first woman in a professional position in the Democratic National Committee for Bobby Kennedy's presidential campaign. And she was co-chair of the Democratic National Convention in 1980 and 1984. All of those achievements and many more came from a woman who says, "The greatest gift God ever gave me was being born a female child to a poor Mexican-American family in a bigoted community." This is a woman who took signs that said "No Mexicans or dogs allowed" as a personal challenge and made it her responsibility to prove that she and her community were as good as. Okay, so we have a question. I'd like to know more about your curriculum for middle and high schools. And I didn't review it before I got on the call today, but I have it. And there's a vocabulary list, there's a during reading activity, there's lesson plans, there's poster development for Prezi, there's a speaking rubric, there's a vocabulary worksheet, and there's paired reading. And if it's available on the Fulcrum website, if you go, I'm sorry, I don't have the link and I would have to go look it up. If you go to Fulcrum Books, FULCRUM books.com, and then you go to the Teachers Resources tab on the Fulcrum, and I think that's what Beth is doing right now, the Teachers Resources tab, then you can find it and get it in the schools. I will tell you that one of my friends, Beth actually knows her, Beth Barella, had her 13-year-old granddaughter do it, and she said it was fabulous, and she wanted it to be in her school. So I hope that that's helpful. All right. How can we get in touch with you to present to book groups? This I'm going to type here. So I could type it right. I'm going to give you my email and my cell phone. And I actually spoke at Colorado State last night, and I speak all the time. I love to do it. It's wonderful. So let's see, www teacher. Yeah, I mean, you just, Fulcrum Books with an S, and Beth just posted the direct link right above. Okay. So I can do more stories. I can do more questions. And anybody else in the chat?
I wouldn't mind hearing some sound bites. Oh,
Right,
Barb,
you
were you
wanna
going
hear
to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say something that, well, first of all, I don't know. I was planning some civic activity Well, it was with Indivisible, come to believe. This is a couple of years ago. And I went over to one of the houses of one of the members, and we were discussing about what we were going to do with this whole project. But anyway, the bottom line is Pat, what's her name?
Polly Baca?
Polly Baca was there. And, I don't know, I've lived in Greeley for 25 years, but I really hadn't crossed paths with her, but she was telling her story, and I was just absolutely taken back and in awe, and clearly I know what Greeley's like, and the bigotry and the historical racism that's in the community. But anyway, and I know she was also honored as one of our leaders of democracy the year before last. So, I mean, it's really exciting to hear her story, but it's even more exciting to, some of these people are still alive. But,
Right. All right. So,
yeah. That being said, I'll just say we have an excellent, junior Chautauqua program up here. So that this book would really be fun for kids to look through, to find people to represent and play in the Chautauqua.
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, the stories are small. The bios are small, but all 50 of them are in here. They all have bios on the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame website, which is cogreatwomen.org. Many of them have fuller Wikipedia bios. I'm actually in the process of adding photos to many of the Wikipedia bios, but that won't happen until maybe the end of September, because I have a big project that I'm working on that it's going to take me time until then. Let me see if I can do this. I'm going to go.
Oh, that's cool.
That's Christine Arguello.
Yeah.
And let's see if this will work. Oh, did I do? Oh, maybe I didn't. I'm going to wait. I'm not sure I did this right. Yeah, I have it right. Okay. So let's just see.
So are those little icons below her picture? Are they significant?
Those are from the book.
Okay.
Those are part of the book. And maybe I thought I just had to do this in order to get it to play. We got this to work, Beth.
Yep, I'm not hearing anything.
All right, hold on. Maybe I'm not hearing anything. I was going to play her. I just saw it. Where did it go?
There's a certain button that you have to.
There we go.
I was a beautiful maid. I wasn't gonna get married because no man was gonna tell me. I met my husband my first week of college. He was a junior. I was a freshman. He was Hispanic, but he cooked, he cleaned. He wasn't intimidated by my intellect. He wasn't intimidated by my dream. I told him my dream, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to Harvard, and he was like very supportive. So I actually got married to him 4 months after we met. Harvard was the only law school I applied to, believe it or not. I was so naive. I've always had this very strong will that I would accomplish what I wanted to accomplish, and nobody was going to tell me I couldn't.
All right. So we are going to, let's see if we can hear Martha.
What I have is a relentless optimism. I will never give up. I'll never give in. You can't make me give in. I'll never give up. If I am determined that this is the way to be or this is the way to go, let's just do it.
And so that was an interview that we did on Zoom. And so what we're doing, I have a friend in Atlanta who took the interview tapes for me and put their official Colorado Women's Hall of Fame portraits with them. And so let's do Polly's.
I've always said that it's not the challenges you face, it's how you respond to those challenges. So I became aware of my first challenge when I was 3 years old. 3 years old, my family had moved to Greeley, Colorado, and there was one Catholic church in town, and we went to that church, and I saw these little girls that were all dressed in white to march around the church, and I wanted to sit in the center aisles. my parents, finally acquiesced, and we sat in the center aisle. And sure enough, an usher came and told us we couldn't sit there because it was segregated. Mexicans and Mexican Americans had to sit on the side aisles. They couldn't sit in the center aisles. And there were signs in the store windows that said no Mexicans or dogs allowed. The theaters were segregated. It was, and I knew at that young age that something was wrong. I carried this burden on my shoulders about it was up to me to change it. I just had this passion that came from that pain of bigotry that I was responsible to change it.
All right, so there's two more that are in this presentation, if you want me to do them.
Sure.
All right, so we did Martha's already, so let's do Diana's. This is Diana Wall. She's a nematode specialist. That's a worm.
Oh,
2 features in Antarctica are named for her. She has spent 25 years in Antarctica, and that's a picture of her in Antarctica.
oh my gosh.
Wait a minute. Come here, play.
I'd been a postdoc, and I all of a sudden got an offer to teach it for the first time, and it was in agriculture. And I can remember walking down the hall one of the last days, and I saw a guy that I didn't know. He was, I was about 30, and he was a full professor. And he said, "Oh, are you that girl in ag?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm teaching in ag. I'm temporary faculty, but I really like it here and all that." And he said, "We don't need any more women in ag." I was stunned, and then I was sad and thought, what am I going to do about this? It was something that made me very aware that, I have to carve out something different than the men do.
And so what we did for her is her story is called "We Don't Need Any More Women in Ag." And she's under determination, perseverance, and persistence in the book. And her interview was just delightful. That's Justina Ford, Dr. Justina Ford. And she actually was quoted in the Rocky Mountain News saying, "Whatever color they turn up, that's the color I take them." And she was referring to her patients. She actually spoke, I think, 7 languages. She
Oh, wow.
her in 1902. And she treated individuals in the migrant camps, in the immigrant camps. And so, all right, so that you heard Christina already, and hers is social support, and her story is titled, "I Thought My Middle Name Was Cabezudo," which is Spanish for stubborn, because her mother called her Christy Cabezudo all the time. She didn't want, and what you didn't hear in her soundbite is she was the oldest girl, so she was expected to do all the chores around the house for her brothers, and they weren't expected to do anything. And so she had decided that she wasn't getting married. And she also had decided at a very young age that she was going to the Harvard Law School. And that was, as you heard in the quote, that was the only law school to which she applied. And she did, in fact, go to Harvard. And the discrimination that she faced at Harvard was primarily from the Latino men.
Wow.
So this is Carlotta Walls Lanier, your leader of democracy. And this is the last soundbite that I have in this presentation. It's my standard half-hour presentation.
Every person has to take responsibility for living in this world as a kind and humane person. There are people out there that I know they want to understand better, but they need to relax and not have the fear of knowing other people and other cultures.
All right. So I'm going to stop the sharing. And I see there's something else in the chat. Oh, yes, I did.
Jill, was there a skill that weighed heavier than others, or were they pretty equal?
Well, the way they slotted with these stories that were just, it was a random sample of people. And so the biggest slotted stories were determination, perseverance, and persistence, resilience, and action orientation, taking action, being very determined. Spirituality and moral compass actually has a fair number as well. I mean, and passion. I mean, it's hard. We slotted them only in one.
Sure.
Okay, so probably the best thing to do for this one, Beth, how can we get your books and what are the titles? The big three titles are Hollywood Her Story, An Illustrated History of Women in the Movies. And if you go to my Wikipedia page, which is at, Beth, at the bottom of my email signature, the link to my Wikipedia page, or you go to my LinkedIn page, either one. But my Wikipedia page has all of the books that I've written so that you can see them there. And although Wikipedia does not allow me to update my own web Wikipedia page, I have figured out a way to do that. So I have someone who I give the code to and they put the code in. And so the big three, Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, to Hollywood, Her Story, An Illustrated History of Women in the Movies, and Over, Under, Around, and Through. Her Story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, is more than 850 women in US history from 1587 to 2011 in a vivid visual timeline format. They're very, very small biographies or very, very small write-ups for each of the women. Some are maybe as long as 5 or 6 sentences. Some are as short as 1 or 2 sentences. And there are also socio and economic things that were happening during the history. So the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, the finishing of the Transcontinental Railroad, the opening of the first school for women, those kinds of things are integrated within the stories of the women. And then Hollywood, Her Story, An Illustrated History of Women in the Movie, is all of the women in front of, and not all of them, more than 1,200 women, both in front of and behind the camera, that help make movies. It starts in 1893 and goes to 2018. And it's editors and directors and producers and actresses and screenwriters and animal trainers and voice actresses and costume designers and production designers and musicians and everything, special effects, sound, everything in the movies. And it's a beautiful, beautiful book that has won many, many design awards.
What would you say the reading level of the book about women in Hollywood is? Because it sounds like it would be an awfully good book to give a middle schooler or a high schooler who hasn't even imagined those kinds of jobs. And
right,
fall in love with
exactly.
it.
Exactly. I mean, and we don't really know. I mean, just think about, which just came to my mind, Frozen, or Kung Fu Panda, or Brave, or any of those movies. Those were actually women produced those movies.
Huh.
And were directors of photography and things like that. And so I would say, because it's both of them are so heavily pictures, that the reading level, I haven't done it for Hollywood Her Story. I know that the reading level for the first Her Story is a little high, maybe in the high school level.
That's okay. Okay.
But I would say Hollywood Her Story is very, very appropriate.
All right.
Middle
Great.
school, high school. It's that one I have at hand. I didn't think to get the other one close to me. But it's a big book.
Oh,
Whoa.
it's a big book.
It
Oh,
weighs 4 pounds.
Oh my gosh, that is a big book.
And it is
Wow.
drop dead gorgeous.
Okay, perfect.
No.
Thank you. You just gave me the gift for my granddaughter who is in the
Perfect.
theater. So this is like,
So I'm
perfect.
just going to
It's
show you
Christmas
this.
shopping day.
yeah.
This is each decade starts this way.
Nice.
And
love
then that theme of what is in the decades actually carries through for the chapters and is actually the basis of the table of contents. So, I mean, the woman who designed both of the first two of my story books just is amazing. Absolutely
Excellent.
amazing.
Thank you. Perfect.
You are welcome. And you'll learn a lot. I mean, and people who like the silent screen era, the biggest decade in this book, when women had the most opportunities in the film industry, was the 1910s. Because women started being pushed out of the industry in the 1920s, and they're still endeavoring to reclaim all of the roles that they had back at the beginning. Alice Guy Blaché was one of the first, well, we think she was the first female producer, and she had her own company in 1910. You know, she's in here and she's actually in the book in 1896. And we love her, and there's a documentary on her that's out. And so, yeah, I mean, what Beth didn't say in the introduction, because it's not in my introduction, is that my job now, I mean, I still am a little in electrical engineering and doing that kind of stuff, but my job now is to write women into history, to tell women's stories and to write women into history. And there aren't books like what I've written. When Charlotte Waisman and I started writing her story, A Timeline of the Women Who Changed America, she told me that, and I did not really believe her. I mean, it didn't matter. I was going to write the book anyway. And then I was writing a book that hasn't been published. My co-author on that book has become very ill, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to finish it. But it's about women in the food industry, not just chefs, but all kinds of different things, cooking schools and cookbooks and the potato chip and the chocolate chip cookie, you know, and all those kinds of things.
And even ag.
Yeah, exactly. And even in ag and, oh yeah, and wine country and driving for food companies. I mean, all kinds of different sorts of things. Oh, and then there's also the little prohibition and wine anyway during prohibition. But when my co-author got very discouraged because another book got published about women in the food industry while we were working on the book. And what I said to her is, go Google how many biographies of Abraham Lincoln there are. And I believe the number was at the time 15,000. If there can be 15,000, I think it's closer to 16,000 now. If there can be 15,000 biographies of Abraham Lincoln, there can be 2 books.
Yeah.
About women and food. You know, and everybody comes at it from a different perspective, and everybody tells the story slightly differently. But writing women into history is so important, and it's very important now. And we thought, I mean, I'm an engineer. I spoke at CSU last night. I think I mentioned that. And somebody said, oh yeah, we don't have any problems. We're getting close to 50% in women in engineering. No, we're not. We're at 20% nationally still. And I've only been working on that since 1979 actively, you know, and so when are we going to get to 50-50? I spoke at a retirement center on August 17th, and it was for the men's breakfast club. And there were a few women that were there that were invited to come at breakfast to hear me speak, but not to come to breakfast. And one man said, you know, you just gave us a biased presentation. And I'm thinking, I just gave you a presentation about women in history, and everything I told you was factual. So why was it a biased presentation? And the answer is because I talked about women. He says, women don't want to be engineers and scientists. And of course, I could not use the language that immediately came to mind to answer him because it was not appropriate. But I said to him that that was not correct, that in countries where students take tests and then the results of the tests determine their career choice, that women are almost half of the engineers and scientists. And that it's not a function of brain power. It's not a function of capability. It's a function of socialization and social expectations. And he was sitting there the whole time I was giving him the answer, going like, shaking his head, because I wasn't giving in to him, and I wasn't letting him bully me either. So we still have a lot of work to do to get women's stories told and pay equity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what I'm working on.
Good for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. What else may I talk about or answer, or what else would you like to ask or to know about?
Once you get finished with the women in food, what's your next, what are you projecting? What's fascinating you and grabbing your?
Well, I'm actually writing 3 books right now, not the women in food book. My co-author had a massive heart attack and stroke.
Oh dear.
In May of 2020. And I've had one correspondence with her since then in November of 2020, and I haven't heard from her since then. So I don't know what's happening with that. That's on the back burner until I figure out where she is and what she's doing and what needs to be done next. So I met a young woman who's a magician, and she had always wanted to write a book, a history of women in magic. And we have that one. That one's probably 80% done at this point in time. We're working on that. And then Fulcrum decided that we're going to have a Stories of Leadership series. And they said to me, he said to me in my discussion with him, we're going to have a women's leadership series. And I said, no, we're not. If every men's leadership book that has been published is a leadership book, then we're not having a women's leadership book. We are having a leadership book.
Yeah.
So the second, well, there are two book contracts that have been signed, and I'm involved in both of them. One is Women in Business, and we actually did an interview today for women in business and leadership, women's leadership in business. And we have more scheduled. And that book is supposed to be finished at the end of 2023, not published at the end of 2023, but finished. And then I told you, I asked people to blurb my book, to blurb over, under, around, and through. And I did that last December. And one of the women I asked, her name is Dr. Antonia Novello, Novello. She was the United States Surgeon General from 1990 to 1993, the first female and the first Hispanic US Surgeon General. She was the 14th US Surgeon General. And when I asked her to blurb it, I have met her several times. I've been on one panel with her. I've known her since '94 when she was inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. She said that she had dictated, or she had recorded 24 hours of interviews of her life, and that she wanted to get her book published. She'd had 6 of them transcribed, 8 of them still needed to be transcribed, and would I help her find a publisher? So I helped her find Fulcrum as her publisher, and Fulcrum decided that I was going to write the book.
Yeah.
So I have finished transcribing, which is just brutal. 13 of the 18, I did 3 of them over the weekend. So I have 5 left to do. She's very actively helping me. She has an unbelievable story. Very briefly, because I know we don't have much time left. She was born with a condition called congenital megacolon, which meant that she couldn't actually use the bathroom. She couldn't have bowel movements, and she didn't have the surgery to fix it until she was 18. And the only man that would do it, the only doctor that would do it in her very small town in Puerto Rico where she grew up, was the cardiac surgeon, who left her with a rectal vaginal fistula and cut her fallopian tubes. And that finally got fixed when she was 20 at the Mayo Clinic, and she became a doctor. And
Amazing.
her story is just, it's just one unbelievable thing after another all the way down. And so, and she's very, as you might imagine, she's very strong-willed. And so we're going to have a little headbutting when I start getting ready to write it. I have already gotten some of the chapters have come into my head, what they're titled and how the book is going to move forward, which I don't think is how she thinks it's going to move forward. So it's going to be a very interesting process, but it's really a fabulous story. She's the only Surgeon General, she says, that doesn't have a book written about her. And she's the only US Surgeon General that doesn't have an endowed chair at a university. I'm helping her with that too. So that's, I have nothing happening.
Oh my gosh. How many hours a day do you spend then on writing?
Oh, I mean, today I've spent almost none, but
Okay.
I worked all day Saturday, I worked all day Sunday, I worked all day Monday. I mean, I work. This is what I do, you know, and it's not always writing. Like right now, it's transcribing these tapes, which I mean, I can transcribe 10 minutes in an hour on a good day. Or in a good,
Well, I know that's tedious.
it's very hard when, I mean, hers is very heavily accented.
Right.
So that makes it harder, but it's fascinating. It's just fascinating. And she's a very active participant, which is good. When I send her the transcript that I've done, she sends me handwritten notes that then I have to type. but that provide additional information, you know, fill in blanks and provide perspective and do other things. So it's really an interesting process. And what I told the students at Colorado State last night, if in 1994, when I got divorced and I went into counseling and I started really thinking about what my life was going to be, if you had told me that this is what I would be doing in 2022, I would have rolled on the floor. You never know.
No, you don't.
Never know. So, and I love to talk, in case you can't tell. Go anywhere, anytime, any place, as long as I can, as long as it works.
Sure.
And so, thank you, and let me know if there's anything I can do to help you.
Okay, well, gee, thanks for sharing all the things that you've been doing. And I think you're an excellent resource for a number of people. So
Great, well, thank
keep you in
you.
mind for the young Chautauquans. And I really think the middle school curriculum has a lot of potential too.
It really does. And it was developed by a teacher. It's real, well, according to a 13-year-old, which is of course the audience that we wish to have.
Right.
Critique it. It's really good.
Excellent.
And
thank
Jill,
you.
I would just like to say I love your name, but
Of
also
course.
you're very inspiring. And where do you live? Are you?
I live in Centennial.
Oh, in Centennial. Oh, you're my neighbor.
I live at Dry Creek in Holly. I live in Homestead Farm.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm in Highlands Ranch. Okay,
Of
nice to
course.
meet you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, I'm right here, and I love to do this, but more important, it's important to me to tell women's stories and to write women into history.
Well, thank you for what you're doing. I may have to
Yes.
check out that one
Yes.
on film the film
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah,
Hollywood.
it's a beautiful book, and you know, we just know certain names, and we don't understand all of the other people, but and all of the other women who were involved to make it happen.
Yeah, I don't think kids are really understand, the dynamics of all the other associated careers. They just
Right.
see the movie stars, but they don't, there's something that somebody has to put that all together and make it
Right.
happen.
Oh, and I mean, and lighting and editing and
Oh,
script,
yeah.
writing the script and staging it. Where is it going to
Staging, yeah.
and here's the silly thing, and these people are not in my book, but somebody has to provide them food while they're on set.
Yes.
That is
Absolutely.
huge.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, somebody's got to build the sets and all that.
Exactly. And dress them and put the furniture on the set
Oh,
and everything.
yeah, I know.
Mhm.
The people, when they get awards for costumes at the
Right.
Oscars, I'm
Yep.
just amazed at
Yep.
what they've done.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Hairdressing too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And makeup,
Makeup,
hairdressing, all of it. Yeah.
Right. I had a
Oh,
student.
thank you.
Mhm.
It is inspiring. I'm going to have to look into all of these. So
I
thank
had
you.
a student once who was a high school student with learning disabilities and was fascinated by makeup. And the project she did during the summer program that she was in with me was all about horror film makeup.
Oh,
And I
there's a
could
whole
just see-
specialty.
Yes.
It's a whole specialty. How do you do the blood?
Uh-huh.
All of it.
Mhm.
And
Absolutely.
it was amazing how much she learned and how much she wrote. This is a child with dyslexia. So how much she wrote and how excited she was to share all of this information. So I think, for students, this could really turn them on, and just all sorts of students, this could really turn them on. Thank you.
Good. Well, it's a beautiful, you'll love it. It's a beautiful book. Everyone who likes movies just loves it.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. This has really just been special. Thank you.
Yes.
It was very fun. Thank you very much. I really appreciate being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
All
care.
right.
Thanks so
All
much.
right. Bye-bye.
We'll be in
Bye.
touch. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Beth, for planning it.
You bet.
Okay, thank you.